Hello, my name is Catalina Alzate. I am an assistant professor in graphic design at the University of Illinois. And I'm making this video to talk about community acupuncture and design and the way that I see these two worlds converging in very beautiful ways. Um, this video is for people who know what community acupuncture is and ideally people who have experienced it. So for those of you who don't know what it is, you can go to my website, criticalanatomies.com, and there is a tab in community acupuncture, read about it, research about it, learn from it. And if you haven't experienced community acupuncture, I feel like this video is possible because I'm a patient of a community acupuncture clinic. So what I'm trying to say is that experiencing really, I think, is the way to embody the learning of what the community acupuncture is and all the benefits it has and about acupuncture and in general. Um, so I assume so, and I hope that I am that my points are clear, but I just want to say like it will become more clear if you know what I'm talking about in the first place, because I'm not going to be explaining what community acupuncture is, right? Um, but besides that, I do want to note that what I'm sharing today is, as I said, is a very embodied understanding of what it is. There is a lot of, I would say, affect involved in when I'm talking. And it comes mostly from that space of being a patient and having the experience. I am now doing more research and learning more about the model and all that. And when I started reading about community acupuncture, I was like, oh, that's why I have such a great experience in my community acupuncture clinic. Oh, that's why the acupuncturist does this or doesn't do this. Oh, that's why, like, it's like, oh, I see. There was like an underlying logic. Uh, but it was so beautifully, it is so beautifully um, woven within the practice of community acupuncture that it really is something real. You know, when I'm talking about a healthcare system, and all healthcare systems will tell you, we care for you, you are important. You know, I went to the doctor this morning and they needed to take my weight, completely irrelevant. And there was a little thing said like, this is just a measurement of gravity, nothing to do with who you are, um, kind of terminology. Um, but the reality of those statements is very different. You do feel treated differently because your body communicates something different. And that's something for me very so present when I visit the medical system as a brown woman with an accent, speaking mostly to white doctors. But the difference with community acupuncture, and indeed, I'm going to put it here, there is this nice image of this poster that talks about, we are not going to talk about body size. It is a reality. Indeed, this is kind of somewhere in a corner. If you read it, that's cool. If you don't read it, you anyways get the benefits of community acupuncture not being judgmental or how you look like. And it's really, is a reality. And so when I started experiencing a very compassionate, a very generous, and a very radical healthcare system, then the system was serving me not only by providing me treatment, acupuncture, but it was really helping me connect with what is health, what is well-being, how do I work towards health, and what's the relationship I'm establishing with those who know about health, the doctor, the acupuncturist, right? And a lot of what acupuncture does, I think by itself, and especially we do it in a community setting, is that reconnection with your own power to take care of this body. But anyways, that's just to say that kind of I was talking about where this knowledge comes from, and from this embodied experience, I was like, this is 100% a design project. For me, community acupuncture is an excellent example of service design. Service design is one of the things I teach. Uh, and indeed, my first thing with the clinic was to get all my service design students to get acupuncture. Go watch the video. Um, and it was amazing. And it made absolutely total sense to students after understanding what design is, what services are, how systems work, to go to community acupuncture and be like, there is an underlying system here. And a lot of the work we do as designers is to make that system visible. I feel like that's kind of one of my intentions, and also one of the things I do very well is being able to think about these systems visually. And when you put it out and put it in conversation with people, you can do wonders, right? Like if people are really understanding the root of why systems are placed in one reason or the other. I see my students, well, whatever. Anyways, so just to say that that was my interest as a designer, to start seeing how this is a system. And especially, as I was saying, in a world when we say like, oh yeah, healing experiences, yeah, that's also like super commercialized and super distorted. Then how do we design those? And what does it mean to be so subtle with the design, like community acupuncture? So there is one of the books that I had it with me. I don't know where I left it, like 1 minute ago. There is one book in design theory that informs a lot what I'm going to be talking about. It's Designs for the Pluriverse. It's a book written by Arturo Escobar. He's a Colombian anthropologist. The book came out in the pandemic, or I got it in my hands in the pandemic for a reason. And for me, it articulated what a designer like myself and many others have been trying to think about and put it in the framework of sustainability, uh, interdependence, informed by indigenous scholars, informed by all the design theory this guy could read. And so it was a very transformative book in the sense that it really showed us with words, even though we knew this for a long time, that that we don't need more design to support uh, really the degradation of the planet, violent systems, social inequity, etc. So what are the designs we need? What are the technologies we need? And for me, we need community acupuncture in society. And I'm gonna kind of, this video is like, why? So if I'm arguing that community acupuncture is a design project, what are its underlying structures? And for me, there is so much to learn from that structure for the system, for replicating and for extrapolating, cross-pollinating. Well, so now I have some notes here, and I put kind of a blurb of this on the website where I talk about the intersections with design. And by the way, what I'm gonna do right now is to share screen to that. Okay, how do I do it? Sure. Yeah, there you go. So as I say, you click in community acupuncture, whatever. This is for people who don't know it. But intersections with design. Um, well, I would say the first thing to say is, why do I call this a living design system? Living because it changes all the time. It adapts to the context. It is in constant struggle with systems. It's pretty much very, very much alive, community acupuncture, as a system. That's how I feel it. And by the way, I should say also there is literature about community acupuncture that I haven't read. So there may be some stuff that I'm trying to read from the system, but may not be accurate. I don't know. Anyways, but it's a living design system also because it is concerned with the notion of protecting life. And this sounds very weird, but it protects, or it works, community acupuncture as a system, it functions to really make sure that those who are the most excluded from all systems can have relief, can have a better health. And these communities sustain our society in all forms of labor, and with terrible violent histories, communities with a lot of trauma. Um, so it's sustaining that life. It's life sustaining, and and kind of allows communities to be healthier in a very real sense. That's why it's community acupuncture, but it kind of it's the way I wrote it here is concerned with this aspect of reconnection. And this is one of the first things, or maybe the thing that Escobar argues in his book. He talks about how in a world where we are so disconnected, we live in an ontology of separation and oppression. The work that we need to do and that we are urged to do is a work rooted in the task of reconnection, restoring relationships between people, their bodies, and their environments, and the role of community intimacy and place as very essential for the kind of systems that we need to see in a world where we are every time more disconnected, especially from our bodies, but also between each other. When I talk about design, and I could have said this earlier, but by now I think it's a little clearer, I'm not thinking about a particular discipline of design. So we have like graphic design, industrial design, service design, technology design. I am coming from a perspective of design that is not attached to any of these forms. We can think about all these types of design as like they take a different form. Sometimes it's a graphic or it's a product, right? And rather to say what's the project of design in terms of systems, in terms of infrastructures. I'm going to talk about infrastructures in a bit. So that is a design that can take any form, because as I was saying earlier, the point of visualizing those infrastructure, talking about those systems, is from the practical side is how do we put them in conversation with the people who can talk about the system that maybe don't see it yet. And that sometimes it's an infographic, sometimes it's a dance, sometimes it's a participatory space, sometimes it's a body mapping, right? So it's the form really comes with what the context is needing. And so that's why this is the starting point of our design. And if like to learn a little bit more about it, there is some statements here on the website. But so I'm gonna start with some of the notions that for me make community acupuncture so incredible. I'm a big supporter. Um, so the notion of autonomy. Oh my God. And I didn't say that I'm not prepared to do this. Like I have some notes here, but I really just whatever. Let's see. Um, Autonomy. Let's see. There is, I mean, to kind of talk. The book talks about in a particular way about autonomy. The way I read that term in this context is in relation to the loss of autonomy in more traditional healthcare systems. So if we are giving trusting a system controlled by big pharma, by the larger businesses, by political interests interwoven with the industry, um, then is there is an element of manipulation, obviously, right? Like big pharma, like making people overconsume chemicals and toxic stuff in ways that they don't need it, which has brought a lot of problems to women's bodies, for example. So then, you take those pills, the pills are kind of in control of what's going on in the body, and then you lose that, you become dependent on a medical model. Now, nothing wrong with drugs when we need them, right? Like that's also obviously is a part of like science and medicine that we need, right? But yeah, but it's more talking about kind of the prevailing, like what is built upon. So in this context in which most of us learn to be dependent on a system, community acupuncture from the point of view of a patient provides and gives us the tools to figure out how do we want to manage this medicine. And that for me was the most very transformational things that came with community acupuncture was that, and this was not a rational thing, it was a very embodied reality that I needed to go to the clinic for. I started going every week for like the first 6 months or so because my body needed it. And there is, the acupuncturist asked me, like, how are you today? Like, what's going on? And I remember sometimes thinking, like, what am I going to tell him? Because I'm going just because my body wants it. And maybe I have stress because everyone is stressed, right? So I get to the clinic and I'm like, I don't know, I'm coming. I just want to rest. And he's like, okay, perfect. And he's like, it's like, oh yes, I can make this decision. So I can go to a space to access healthcare without having to over explain my life and also to find a problem with me or to, have something negative going on. It's like you can also be existing and still benefit from resting from community. And so that was for me, it was giving me back the autonomy that I haven't learned in other medical systems. It was kind of helping me decide or giving me the power to decide, um, give me a power, I don't know, but helping me decide when, right? So after I was going every week, I started going every 2 weeks and then once a month. And it's been a while, I haven't had it. And then I'll go back to it when I need it. It's because I established a relationship with the medicine. And of course, um, it's never we all live, there is nothing like the me and the medicine as separate entities, right? Like uh uh, we are the linkages, we are the connections, and these are never between only two things. It's a whole system. So obviously, it was not only like, oh, my way to do acupuncture is also the fact that it was in a community setting, that the acupuncturist has a particular way of doing it, that the person in the reception also has a way of treating me. And all these things kind of started making sense. I was thinking this morning because I went to the doctor and there is certain familiarity and certain almost like warmth when I get to the community acupuncture clinic that it makes you feel seen. And that's something I've been thinking about lately, this idea of being seen by a medical system, having a like that sense of familiarity with the community acupuncture, the person in the front desk. It transforms because she genuinely knows my name. Like, she's expecting me to be there. She welcomes me, and all that is just a space that we don't have in society, right? Like we don't have a place. I mean, we obviously don't have places where people go and take a nap next to strangers, right? Like that's rare. It's a gem. I mean, when I found that, I was like, oh my goodness, what is this? Because I have I'm a mother of a young child. I don't get to rest, to have like brain off time at home because I have to wash dishes, right? So having a space in the city where I could go rest, when no one is asking me questions, and where I can sometimes need a 20 minutes nap, but sometimes I stay there for 2 hours. And one day I was very sick. And I wanted to surrender to the medicine and just I knew that I needed to stay there even after the pains have told me that it was time for the acupuncturist to call the acupuncturist to take them off. I forced myself to stay for like 3 hours, 3.5 hours. I got healed from what I had. But it was that capacity to decide I need 3 hours of the medicine today versus I'm okay with 20 minutes, and that this is independent from the rest of the parts of the service. Like I will always get the smiles from the receptionist. I will always be charged uh, what I want to pay, right? I think the sliding scale obviously is the could have mentioned that earlier, but like it's is that giving you that power. Um, Again, and I was reminded, I'll try to go to my next point, because I was telling my mom who came to visit, I told her to go get community acupuncture. And she's like, tell me more about it. So I was like, yeah, so this is how it works. This is what happens. And then you pay how much you want. And that was the point that for my mom was like, what? What do you mean? I'm like, yeah, you decide, mama. Like sometimes you have $25, sometimes you can spend a little bit more. And she was like, are you serious? Because it was more like, this is what I always wanted. And I think this is what everyone wants. Everyone's, and maybe this takes me to the next point is that everyone wants to be well. Everyone wants to be able to choose how much to pay for healthcare. Like everyone will love to do that, right? It's like where we gravitate towards. And a community acupuncture shows you that, oh yes, it's possible here in 2025, in the middle of a world in war, destruction, and violence. Here you can continue to have this. Oh, I did a survey with patients and they call it an oasis. Here you can have these spaces that we dream about, and that when we think about design and designing for futures, for me, this is the future, like community acupuncture is like, this is where we're moving towards. Um, so anyways, this ocean notion of autonomy, let's see, I there is a notion, there is something that I was thinking about infrastructure in. There is this quote inspired by this quote by another designer called Ezio Manzini, and the quote says, "The goal of design becomes the support of individual and collective life projects." Life projects, again, a big thing, but that was the thing. Like design, when we design something, we are, this is more in the design side, but like you are not really designing a solution for something. You are affecting a system, um, and ideally supporting what's already living in that system, right? That's why I feel like parachuting design solutions on being like, this is the next technology that is going to help the world without, it's one way, but another way is to be like, what's going on in the context already and what is working well and how do we build from that? So community acupuncture kind of taps into those strengths of people. It's like you want to be well. So it becomes an infrastructure for me as a patient to have a health plan or like a journey towards health and towards well-being. It provides the infrastructure. It's like here we have the physical space, here we have the music, here we have the acupuncturist, here we have the ideology, here we have the history. It's like this is all this, and as a patient, I come into a very, very strong infrastructure because it's people's infrastructure, right? Like the whole history of community acupuncture is showing us that it's born from the needs of the people. Um, and so we have this infrastructure that we can trust in, right? Like I, as a patient of community acupuncture, I continue going because I trust that this system, that I'm okay if I go there. I don't feel threatened. I feel safe. And it becomes like one of the building blocks for me to, like a strong will building block to think about my health more generally. Um, and I was writing here about how everyone is designing their health, their whatever, designing their well-being journeys, and how community acupuncture help us design. Like we are in a constant kind of both ways designing kind of thing. Anyways, um, I was thinking about the notion of infrastructure, design as the expansion of people's capacity to achieve what they value, while continuously recreating conditions for community growth. Blah blah blah. And then what I say here is that in this idea of designing an infrastructure for people's well-being, there is a form of collective intelligence, um, where the contributions of everyone are essential. So for community acupuncture is a lot of that. I feel like what the clinic is what the patients are bringing into the space, because it's not a prescriptive place. It's not a place where you go and everyone receives, whatever is in the chart, even if the chart was created with some weird metrics, So this notion of participation, of how patients are participating in the system, and and what how they are designing the system. I think that's what I feel is going on with the community clinic, and that's what makes it a design project, because everyone's participation is essential and valued, the same, like independent of how much you can pay. In these spaces, people rediscover human connection, fostering a relational form of identity unique to each clinic. And I was thinking here about, I wanted to do this project of having postcards and then writing anonymous messages to other patients. Like, there is a person that is always in the same recliner. So when I go there, like I try not to take that recliner because I know we overlap. And so I want that person to have that recliner. So be like, hey, I think about you when I see the recliner, or like messages to many other patients, which is the most amazing thing of the whole community thing, at least in the clinic that we have here, is that it shows me that we can make communities in ways that are not necessarily hugging and holding hands and hugging a tree. Maybe I'll just stop sharing for a second. But in ways that is more about it's like a felt network, a felt community. It's like I don't speak to my neighbor, uh, and probably my body is in much more communication and expressing with some other person who lives nearby. We live in a small town, and it's that this incredible way of building community and feeling part of something like, oh, someone else. And that's one of the research projects I did with my students was like, how do people think about community in the clinic? And I can show that, or you can see it in the website. Anyways, mhm. The next thing, and I have no idea how long this video is. Anyways, there is just two more things, and I'll finish with that. Transitions, emergence, and sustainability. Community acupuncture steps outside existing institutional and epistemic boundaries to strive for worlds and practices capable of bringing about the significant transformations that we need. Oh my goodness, that's a mouthful. Okay. Um, but transitions. So we are working for a better world, social justice, racial justice, health equity, reproductive justice, human rights, all these. Uh, it's not going to happen tomorrow when we wake up, right? We wish. And so something that the transformative justice movement have been teaching me and kind of got me thinking is that that movement towards a better and more just and fair and happy society is a process that we're in a process of transitioning, and involves transforming that current state in which we are. One of the things that I'm more inspired by is abolitionism and the idea of police what's the word, dismantle the police, no, abolishing the police. That at first we can think that, okay, we want to live in a less violent world and we don't want the police because they have caused so much harm. We are not ready to be a society a police-free society, because we still have a lot of issues that we can't handle, calling your neighbor and having good intentions, right? We are so reliant on that system, and that system it's in so much of control that it doesn't make sense to just one day hope for the police not to exist. But it's more like, how are we learning to live together in new ways and relating to each other in new ways, because we are transitioning to hopefully have less and less police interventions, right? And that sounds more like, for me as a designer, that sounds like a more tangible future. Like it gives a reason to the work today, kind of thing. Is like moving towards that transition. And anyways, what I was trying to say is that community acupuncture supports that transition. For me, is like so crucial for that transition because it strengthens relationships. And it shows us kind of the world that we want to live in, where it brings so much connection with so many things between bodies, within the body, between bodies, in the space, etc. Anyways, I have a quote here that says, the practice of transformation really takes place in the process of enacting other worlds and practices. And the practice, right? This is the kind of where this quote is going to, is that as an academic, I try to speak from practice, because I think that's where the transformation is actually happening. And community acupuncture really puts in practice all these ideals for a better world. It kind of does the very hard work, even like at the larger legal economic systems that Lisa writes about in the blog all the time. Is like it's living within all those tensions, and this is the work that we need for the transitions, not giving up. And it changes. It's also a living system, because community acupuncture changes every day. It is in flux, in a continual state of self-creation, compelled to respond to the flow of life. Um, it is a healthcare system shaped not only by politics, financial structures, institutional discourses, academic ideas, and inherited practices and regulations, but also by the daily realities of seeking care, of people designing their lives, of trusting in the intuition of the medicine themselves and the acupuncturist, and by continuous reflection. Um, I think that's kind of what got me to these videos. The opportunities it gave me to reflect about all these things. Blah blah blah. And then I'll write a little bit about being spontaneous and improvising. I think like I can see it in the community acupuncture clinic. Like we are trying to do the best we can and from their perspective, and it looks like figuring out the next month. It's like it's such a living thing because it's like really attuned to what's going on in the context. Okay, my last point, last, and with this I close is this idea of materiality. Materiality is central to rethinking a new economy. It is not only about invisible systems or economic strategy. The new economy rests on land. In this case, the place where the community acupuncture operates, community acupuncture clinics operate, the needles they use, the posters they have on the walls, and everything we can touch from that system. I believe that the community clinic is a territory. What is a territory? Is a system of relations, is a space for the exercise of being. It's more about a collection of independent objects. It's not about the chairs, the needle, the music, and the poster. It's about the interactions that emerge from this network. It's an assemblage. Um, Reading community acupuncture clinics as territories allow us to see how they are not innate surfaces to be occupied, just as land, but rather sentient fields that people inhabit temporarily. The territory of the clinic is animated by ritual, care, and collective healing that echo deep history of human and tribal healing traditions where being, doing, and knowing and feeling are inseparable. And this is inseparable. You can't separate. I was been reading about the role of ritual in healing, like for prehistoric communities. I don't know how you call them, indigenous communities. Um, and I think that's a little bit community acupuncture touches on that a bit by its ritualistic form of being. In ritualistic in the sense that there is a experience for me to go through in the clinic, but it's so intentional that the experience is never the same. It's that ritual that I go to myself in a way as a patient. um where I was saying, as I learned to use the medicine, I learned how to approach the community acupuncture clinic. So sometimes I go because I'm genuinely tired and I just go to sleep. Sometimes don't even sleep because, I'm not stopping my brain and all that. Um, but many times it's like, and this was something amazing that the acupuncturist will always ask me, how are you today? Like, what brings you in today? And it's today. He's not asking me how is my health condition that I said I'm working on when I came here the first time 2 years ago. He's not asking me how do you feel about that thing last week. Sometimes he actually remembers and he's like, "Are you feeling better of your shoulder pain?" Which is amazing. It's like, oh, he remembered that I had shoulder pain. It makes me feel seen. Um, but he's asking me, how are you today? And that was such a grounding thing for me in my journey to health of thinking, how am I today? What am I doing for me today? And that presence is something that the ritualistic, the intention. So sometimes I'm like, today, I don't know how am I going to teach my 2 p.m. class, or today I had a conflict with X or Y. Today I'm thinking about me as a mother and something happened today, whatever. And I just go with that intention and a lot of realizations, a lot of new knowledge. It allows me to see a lot and have solutions and have ideas about my life. And so that's ritualistic. It's like, wow, it's really a space for connecting with that dimension. Anyways, so yeah, talking about the clinic as this sentient field, talking about the fact that it's material, that it matters the way that energies flow in that space, and that is when I entered the clinic, some people, as I was saying in the survey, called it an oasis. People had other very beautiful visualizations of spirals connecting, hands connecting, even though we never hold hands, but people really felt they held by others. It was very beautiful. Anyways, I another one thing that I would like to one day think with acupuncturist is how are we thinking about the body through acupuncture? But that's for another time. Yeah, so let's be in conversation. I'm happy to talk about any of these. I find it very generative. If you're a person involved in community acupuncture as a patient or as an acupuncturist or any other person in the system, thank you so much for the work that you are doing. It's so worth it. It's so life affirming. It changes lives. So I hope to be in conversation and I hope to continue building the world we want to see and the world we want to live in.